Every time I talk to you, man, a garbage truck drives by. Go away. Gosh, man. America, am I right? Anyways.
Welcome to the Honest Designers Show, your transparent look into life as a modern designer. My name's Tom Ross, and I'm the founder at designcuts.com. And this week, I'm joined by my fellow Brit and hand lettering expert, Ian Barnard, American retro design expert, Dustin Lee, and the incredibly talented South African illustrator, Lisa Glantz. This week, we're joined by Brad Colbow, who is a huge creative inspiration to all of your hosts here at the Honest Designers Show. He's had a successful freelance career, juggled multiple projects, including a series of best-selling Udemy courses and a prolifically awesome YouTube channel. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Brad, thank you so much for jumping on, man.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
So glad to have you on. We were chatting just before the show, and I know we've all become familiar with your work over the years. It seems you and Ian have a little digital bromance going on. Sort of admired each other's work from afar.
You've been cheating on me, man. I thought we had something, Ian.
What happens on other platforms?
But Brad, I almost don't know where to start. You've got so many things going on. You've been involved in so many things. Could you maybe just share a little bit about your story, how you started out and how you got to where you are now, and all the awesome things you've been involved in?
Yeah, totally. So like you mentioned, I'm best known for the YouTube stuff. I've been a freelancer on and off for about 10 years. I think I started in August of 2007. So I guess that's 11 years now. And most of the time I was freelancing, there was a little stint in the middle where one of my clients became a real job. When I left that job, I ended up joining some friends who were also freelancers. They agencyed up, like when as a freelancer, when you get too much work and you're like, I'm going to hire people. They were just in that period where they were hiring folks. And so right after that startup thing ran out of money, I jumped ship and I joined them for 2 years. But for the last 4 years, I've been freelancing on my own, and I left that job, but I actually still work with them and do client work with them, that team. And it was around that time that I started fiddling with video, playing around with video, and I started a YouTube channel, just posting stuff, trying some stuff out. It all really started when Adobe went from their they used to sell like their upgrades every year and a half for like $500, $600. And then they went to a period where they're like, no, we're going to charge by the month. And I held out for as long as I could. But then when they went to the monthly subscription, I was like, I held out for like a year, and then I ended up paying the monthly Creative Cloud subscription. But that came with all this video software that I didn't have before. And so I just started fiddling with it and playing with it. And so 4 years later, I've somehow managed to take like my technology hobby and my illustration hobby and jam them together into a YouTube channel where basically I do a lot of reviews. I do some tutorials, and in a loose way, it's kind of recording my progress as an illustrator. It's always been a hobby, and now it's slowly becoming a profession. So on the path from like starting as a freelancer to here, I've been down a lot of different little streets here and there, and I've done web comics, and I used to work with .NET Magazine to publish comic strips, and I've organized a conference. We used to have a conference here in Cleveland where I live. Organized a local meetup, which we did for years before we did the conference, and workshops and stuff. Done a lot of things, but really in the last year or so, the YouTube channel has really taken over and become, my identity.
Amazing.
Love it.
Wow.
So you like being involved in various projects?
Yes,
Probably safe to say.
To put it mildly.
I think what I've discovered is that I really like building something, and I like it more than maintaining it. And so I'm entering a new phase with the YouTube thing. Like there's something exciting about like starting something new and seeing it through and like trying this out and not really knowing where it's going to go. And that's what YouTube has been. But just in the last couple months, it's gotten to the point where I have a handle on it. Like for a while, it just felt like this, like I have no idea what I post and if it's going to be any good or if people will watch it. And now I've gotten to a point where I'm like, okay, I kind of have an idea of what people are looking for with this channel and how to produce it. And I'm starting to understand the tools a little bit better. And now I'm in maintenance mode and I don't know what's going to happen in the next year because I really like building more than I like maintaining. So it's going to be an interesting trip over the next couple of years now that this is becoming my career, you know?
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. Over the years, I've loved launching things probably more than maintaining them. I think the only advice I could offer would be try and constantly be iterating. So even though you're maintaining now, I'm sure there's more stuff you can explore on there, more kind of avenues and so on. But for the record, Brad's YouTube is ridiculous. I can totally tell it's basically your full-time gig because the production value is insane. It's all the little, like the content's great, but it's all the little nuances. And I think any creative, even if you're not a video editor, and we give it the full shout out at the end, but definitely go and check it out after listening to this because it's on point. Like the content's there, but it's like how you present it, the editing, like all the graphical side of it, just very, very slick.
Brad,
Cool.
can I ask? So I totally get, like Tom was saying, I totally get the idea of making something. For me, the process of building something is much more interesting than like the upkeep of it. But with a YouTube channel, it seems like the making of it, and I'm not a big YouTube influencer or anything, so I might be wrong about this, but it seems like a big part of making something or building something on YouTube is creating a massive amount of great content that drives people. So how does it stop becoming creating something and maintaining it? Because wouldn't you always be making videos, which would be essentially creating it?
That's a good point. And I had just, it's funny, it kind of creeps in different ways. So like this past week, I was prepping my video that I published on Monday. And when I started it out, I was just going through the motions and not in a bad way, just kind of like, okay, now I do this and then I write the script and then I do this and this. But when I published it on Monday, sometimes I tend to publish on Mondays. Sometimes when I put up a video, I'm like, okay, that's done. Time to move on to the next one. And you're kind of on autopilot. But for whatever reason, the one I published on Monday just was really satisfying in that like, oh, I created something sort of way. And I don't think I really did anything particularly new on that video. I think it's just all the little parts came together and I was really satisfied with that end result.
That's so cool.
And so that I'm not sure. I guess as I'm going forward and I'm thinking about like the creative aspect of it and creating something, I want to figure out how do I bottle that? Like when that video is done, I can go, oh, wow, that came out better than I thought it would. I think the reason why Monday's video came out well is because I hated the product and I almost never hate the thing I'm reviewing. And this was just one of those rare, usually they're just better. This was the Google Pixel Slate, which is Google's new tablet. And it just it's not really marketed towards illustrators and creatives. So the pen was really jittery. The palm rejection didn't work. And when I first wrote the script, it was scathing. And I thought, I can't publish that, And so I had to rewrite the script. And then I was trying to find that balance between, and I've done this in the past. I've posted a video where I didn't like the product that much, but people would only watch part of the video and go, thanks for your recommendation. I just bought this. And I'll be like, no, what did you do? No, I said, don't buy it at the end. And
that's hilarious.
And so you kind of have to because if you highlight, like I like to highlight the good and the bad, and if people only hear the good, anyway. So with this one, I was like, I want to make it really clear that you should not be buying this thing. And when it was all said and done, I was just so happy with it because it wasn't a rant. Like that was the biggest thing I was worried about. Is I wanted it to be. I wanted to show my displeasure, but I didn't want it to be just all hate. I wanted it to be fair. And oftentimes when you're fair, it doesn't come off as like, I really hated this thing. It just comes off as, well, it can do this and it can do this. And I'll give it the benefit of the doubt here. And I think maybe for the first time ever, I walked that line perfectly. maybe not perfectly, but as well as I think I can at this point
Yeah.
in my video making journey here. And I think that's why I was so satisfied with it, because the early version was too mean. And then I was worried that it was too nice. And when it all came together in editing, it's just that like, oh, I did it. And you don't always get that feeling when you produce something. Sometimes you nail it, sometimes you don't.
So it's like you're covering new ground. So you're like, oh, well, this is all exciting and different. And so that's building it, as opposed to, say, you get into the habit and it's almost just like you're like a well-oiled machine, if any of us can describe ourselves that way.
Right. As well-oiled as a machine can get.
What I really appreciate you doing is, and you said it at the beginning of that review, was that I'm not going to compare this to the iPad, because like the problem is the iPad is so good that it's hard not to compare everything else to it. So that's an art form in itself, just not comparing it to the best out there, because there's there is a group of people who won't buy Apple products, or people who can't have access to it, or don't have the funds, or have been given a different one. So you can't just go, oh, it's not as good as an iPad. That's it.
Yeah, sorry.
The key for any review is not only to say I like this, but also to start to describe why you like something. And that has made me so much better of a writer. I never really thought about the writing aspect of this when this all started, but you really have to dissect it. And part of what drives me is the comment section. Comments can be brutal. I'm sure Ian has seen this. Like the comment section on YouTube is like, sometimes you just want to jump in a
is
river.
like notorious for having the most brutal. They're like, don't even go there. It's like the no man's land.
Right. I'm lucky. Like I think I've got a pretty good comment section going on, but yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a cesspool sometimes. And but there's gems in there. Like in my early videos when I first started, I would just I use this laptop I'm looking into now, and I'd look into this camera. I didn't have a good camera setup or anything. And I just talk about my experience with something. And all of the comments I get, and I still get these comments on those videos today because people still see them, is, I don't want to see your stupid face, or blah, 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 blah. And it's the meanest way they could possibly word it. Like, I really scaled it back to be safe for work there. Like,
no, don't worry about that on this show. Okay.
Yeah. And so, but you're like, that's an old video. And what I want to say to those people is, watch the new stuff. I'm not focused on my face as much, But I think what's important there is in those comments, even though a lot of those comments are mean, there's like good pieces of information you can take away in there. In the last couple months, I've really, I used to spend like a day to 2 days on a video. And then probably I'd say early September, I wrapped up my last freelance project, and I haven't taken on anything new since then. Which we could talk about that later, like that transition, because that's kind of interesting. But I've been focused mainly on YouTube. And Tom, you were saying that like the production is there and whatnot. All of that is fairly new. I'd say like my work from August to now has greatly improved, just because instead of spending 2 days on something, I'm spending 3 or 4 days producing a video. And it
shows. It really shows.
That's good. And
are you totally self-taught? I mean, did you? Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing.
Well,
so wait, how did you tackle that? Because I'd like to get into video myself, but like, I mean, how did you take that on? It just seems such like a huge mountain to.
Sorry, Brad, just to elaborate on what Lisa's asking there. Mm-hmm. So I never like these episodes to be too structured. We tend to organically see where things go. Mm-hmm. But if it's cool with you, it sounds like it would certainly benefit Lisa and myself, and I'm sure everyone listening, I'd love to almost turn this into a bit of a YouTube masterclass.
Let's do it.
Because I know when we've been emailing about today's show, you said you were more than happy to share some of the tactical stuff. And they're some of my favorite episodes, because selfishly, the four of us sit here and take notes and get better. and then we feel happy because we know thousands of people listening at home
are doing the same,
also benefit from it. So if it's cool with you, I'd love to go super nitty gritty, really kind of learn from you how to do it properly. And then at the end, I'd love to dive into some of the mindset stuff around that.
All right.
And we can talk about burnout and like working alone and all that good stuff as well, to show it's not all highs and all the rest of it. And I would just love to know if you could take us from like your amateur YouTube status to where you are now, and some of the best lessons learn along the way, both holistically and tactically, I think that would be super valuable.
Let's do it.
Before he starts,
ahead.
I feel personally that the YouTube space for designers and illustrators is quite small. Is that what you seem to? I think there's lots of opportunities. YouTube's massive, but it seems that everyone seems to be on a vlogger. And it's like, leave the vloggers over there. They're just sort of fighting it out. And actually the creative space for someone to be, consistently posting designery content is actually quite small.
Yes, I completely agree. And we'll say, let's go back to that, because let's kind of jump back and kind of go from the beginning, because I absolutely completely agree with you. So how did I start? It was about when I first mentioned that I got like a subscription to Creative Cloud, and that was the genesis for me. Like, I knew nothing about video creation or anything. And I was we homeschool our daughter. She's in the other room. She's probably hearing me talk about her now, and her ears are peaking up. And if you watch my videos, you will occasionally hear her voice. I do little animated bits in my video, and she voices things. In my iPad Pro review a couple weeks ago, she played the part of the iPad, and she killed it. She was so good. Now her ears are really burning. And so, so we, as a family, our time together is oftentimes like at lunch, because I'm working from home. She's homeschooled. She's got a lot of stuff going on in the evenings, like ice skating and Girl Scouts and stuff. And so our family meal was often lunchtime. And what we do is we prop up an iPad and we'd watch like some kind of educational YouTube video. There's a lot out there. And there's a channel called The Vlog Brothers, which is really well known in the YouTube sphere, but not necessarily outside of it.
I love it.
And yeah, so good. And they did something called Crash Course, which was, I think, a partnership with Google, but there's like Crash Course Science, Crash Course Literature. We really like binge watched the Crash Course world history stuff. So John Green, who's a famous author, and now he's a movie guy because some of his books have been turned into movies. He started as a YouTube vlogger basically 10 years ago. And so they did these little 10-minute informational clips on world history. It was educational, but it was so, on one hand, it looked so easy, but it was also like really good, just funny and interesting, and just a great way to learn history. And as I was watching it, they did a great job, because it made me think, I could do that. I could totally do that. I could be John Green, right? And so that was my first step into video, is that oh God, this is a tangent. So let's go back in time a little bit.
I have to say real quick, just to like emphasize this. So they are so good. I literally will fall asleep to them on at night sometimes, because I'll just be binge watching. I mean, so you were starting with a great place to look for inspiration.
Aspire to.
Yeah. And it looks so easy, like they're just standing in front of a camera talking, but the script is so well written, and the process they go through, you don't realize it until you start making videos, like how much goes into that little stuff. So I had an old project that I had started. I had this dream at one point in my career of creating a graphic novel about that would be a history book about the web, like the history of the internet, the history of the web. And I started doing research, and I started breaking down different pieces, parts. And what I discovered is that if you want to write a history book, even if you want to turn it into a history comic book, it's a lot of research, like a lot of research.
Can you imagine?
And
wow.
So every so often I'd pick it up and I'd play with it a little bit, and I'd pick it up again. And I ended up it was just kind of a side project, something I always thought would be fun. But I broke the book into, instead of doing, the other problem with technology is it doesn't move in a straight line like history. Like you can study, first came World War I, then World War II, and then the Cold War. Well, the history of the internet's like a million different discoveries that kind of mush together over time. And so I started breaking it down because it was so hard to research. I thought, okay, the history of search engines, I can wrap my head around that. The history of Firefox and not Netflix, but Internet Explorer. No. Anyway,
Netscape.
The history of browsers. Netscape. That was what I was looking
for. That was on the tip of my tongue.
Prodigy.
Prodigy, yeah. So
Oprah.
I started taking these different history chunks that I'd written years earlier, and I said, these would make great educational videos in the mold of these crash course things. And they're still on my YouTube channel if you're really willing to kind of sort through the backlog there. They're not very good. But that was my first attempt at like writing and editing video. And it's just, for me, it was just diving in from the deep end. And it was like, I want to produce this thing. And I knew it wasn't anywhere near where I wanted it to be, but it was kind of fun to do and fun to find other clips and just figuring out like how to edit it. And I made so many mistakes. But
so were these like animated illustrations?
Not really at the time. Well, actually they were, because I think I was using Flash, which I was familiar with, which is now Adobe Animate. And I was familiar with Flash because when I started my career as a web designer, I was designing Flash websites in like 2003, 2004 back then. Mm-hmm. So I some of that stuff was animated back then. Little animated timelines and stuff.
And what year was this in that you're kicking off the YouTube channel?
I want to say it was like 4 years ago, 5 years maybe.
So kind of recent-ish. I mean, that's not a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I lost a lot. I put out a couple videos and I posted them on Twitter, and a handful of people watched them. And what I found was after the first one, several of my friends who are well known in the web world said, "Wow, this is kind of neat," and they like retweeted my videos and stuff, and that was neat. And that got me like 500 people watched that first video, and then the second video like 300 people watched it, and the third video like 200 people watched it, and the fourth video like 150 people watched it. And you can kind of I don't think part of it is that on YouTube, you really have to build an audience around like of people who really love what you're doing. I think there were people on Twitter who were kind of like, "Yay, go Brad." I have a lot of friends over the years who were willing to, cheer me on. But at the end of the day, your friends are great, but they're not going to, you need your own audience, right? You can't expect some influencer to retweet you every time you do something in hopes that you'll gain instant fame. So even though it kicked off really, really well, over time, it just kind of died out because it's like, oh, that's just a thing Brad's doing now, And so some of my friends who did have a big following on Twitter they weren't going to retweet every video, And
it's
videos,
also the allure of a launch. Launches get more attention.
Yes.
Like, oh, this is new. And even if they continue to watch, it tails off or they stop engaging because it's not as exciting as that inception point. And
I think, and it might be changing a little bit now, but at the time, the Twitter audience was not a YouTube audience. So like I used to watch, and I wasn't really a heavy YouTube user at the time. I saw YouTube videos, but I wasn't subscribing to channels. I wasn't logging into YouTube to watch content. It was more like, oh, I was on somebody's blog and they had a YouTube video and I'd watch it there, or somebody would link to a YouTube video. And so I think a big part of that audience is the web design audience. At the time, at least, this may be changing now because more people are moving into YouTube. They just weren't, if they'd subscribed to something, they weren't logging into YouTube to get updates about it. So I think that was another factor. So I ran out of steam because it's really hard to produce those. Two, I ran out of content because I only wrote so much, and now I had to do research, and who wants to do research? And so then I would just do random bloggy stuff like, oh, I'm thinking about responsive web design. I'll talk about that today. And I think with every video, I just want to be like a little bit better than the previous video. Like, okay, that last video, the audio was horrible. So I bought this mic that I'm talking into right now. Or the video was really bad. So instead of using my computer video thing, I ended up figuring out how to use my phone to record video and get the audio hooked up to that. Or I figured out how to place a bunch of lamps from other rooms in my office to get the lighting better. Like for me, it was taking it chunk by chunk and not saying, at first I wanted to hit a home run. Like I wanted to make a video and have the whole world see it. But then I started to realize that there's so much to learn that you can't really
That's the problem.
Yeah, the idea of going viral early on is just, it's not going to happen. I mean, maybe it will, but you kind of have to let go of that idea. But if you think, okay, if I make the next video this much better than the last video, 6 months from now, I can look back and go, wow, I came a long way, even though on a week to week basis, it doesn't feel like it. And also, it doesn't put too much stress on you, because I find that like when I want to knock something out of the park, that's when I get writer's block. That's when I'm like, I don't know what to do here. I know nowadays which videos like are going to perform well. I like my iPad Pro review from a couple weeks ago. I was like, it's an iPad Pro. People are going to watch that video. And so I wanted to hit it out of the park, but that's what really, for me, that is like too much pressure. It's like, no, you can't think like that. So I started, so I was doing the video thing, and then I lost a lot of momentum because it just wasn't gaining any traction. In fact, it appeared, according to the metrics, it was losing traction, and it was taking more work to create because I had to do research. And so I started doing the vlog thing, and then, this is another side note, the startup that I worked with for about a year between my 2 stints as a freelancer was a company I became an art director for a magazine specifically designed for the iPad. The iPad was just about to come out. There was an entrepreneur here in the Cleveland area. He started a company called books.com that was bought by Barnes and Noble, and they were competing with Amazon like back in 95 and 96. We know who won that battle. But so whenever he starts a company, people like pay attention. He started like a Java components company and sold it to Cisco. And so this was like his 3rd big company that he was starting. So he asked me if I was interested in being an art director for this magazine for the iPad. The iPad was brand new. And I was like, yeah, I want to be an art director for your magazine. So he hooked me up with a journalist who used to work at the local paper, and the 2 of us basically created a magazine. I did the design and the art direction, and the journalist like wrote a whole bunch of stories. And anyway, it was a fun experiment. What we were trying to do was build a media publishing platform for the iPad. And I worked with a lot of developers while I was there. And one of them knew that my biggest peeve with the iPad was that it was hard to draw on. This, like, your finger was inaccurate. All the styluses were inaccurate. And I was like, all I want is an iPad where I can sit on the couch and draw accurately. And I used to complain about the iPad all the time. And so fast forward a couple years to when I was just starting with YouTube, one of my clients, I was working on site with them part-time. And this guy that I used to work with at the startup was also freelancing, and he was working with them on site. And he got a Surface Pro 2, which was the Microsoft's version of their tablet software back then. And he said, you need to try the stylus on this. It's really good. And at this point, I had tried like dozens of styluses for dozens of devices. It was like trying to draw with like an ATM machine, like where it asks you for your signature at the grocery store or something. You're like, this is not good. Yeah. And so he's like, you got to try it. And he's a developer. So I'm like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And he's like, I got Photoshop on this thing, real Photoshop. You can use the whole thing. So one day at lunch, I sat down, I drew on it, and I was like, oh, this is good. Like, I didn't realize that at the time it was using Wacom's EMR technology. So it was like using a Wacom tablet on this and it was portable. I could go and sit in another room and draw on it and take it with me. It was like everything I always wanted. So I'm like, I'm going out and I'm buying one of these today. As soon as my wife says yes. And so like,
yeah, you know it.
And so he said, don't. The new Surface Pro 3 is coming out in a couple weeks. Just wait a couple weeks, get the new version. It's going to be bigger. It's going to be better. So I was like, okay, cool. I wait a couple weeks. It comes out and I get this thing and I really liked it. Nowadays, I've used like 50 different drawing tablets, so I'm a little more picky about it. But at the time, like, it was accurate. It was so much better. It was like, it was a revelation to me. And so my first thought was that first of all, nobody in the design world was using Windows at the time. I shouldn't say nobody. Most of the people that I knew weren't really using Windows. And nobody was paying attention to anything Microsoft was doing in the creative space. And I was like, whoa, there's like this thing here. And so I did a review of it, and I was going to throw it on my blog, but then I thought, well, I'm doing this video thing. Maybe I could do a fun video review. So over the weekend, I did a video review and I posted it because I had been fiddling with video all year. And I I left my computer and forgot about it and went about my life. And like 3 days later, I checked in, and it had like 50,000 views on that video.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And what I didn't realize at the time is there was only one other illustrator who was using the Surface Pro and testing it out. And I was the only one doing video. And so there were all these questions and all of these people and all these views. And so I was like, whoa, that is crazy. But I didn't really, at the time, I didn't compute that this was like a thing I should do. It was just like, okay. And I went about my life. And like a couple weeks later, it's up to like 100,000 views. And at this point, a buddy of mine who's got a great marketing head said, why is there no affiliate link on that video? Like, put an Amazon link right there in the description so people are finding it useful, and they'll hopefully click on that link and you'll get a kickback. And since it's expensive, you'll get a good kickback. And so I was like, whatever. They bugged me about it a couple of days later. And so finally I made, because I had to go and I had to make an affiliate account with Amazon, and that took like 10 minutes. Who's got 10 minutes, right? So I went, I made the account, and the very next day I had $25 in my Amazon account. Someone had clicked the link and bought a Surface Pro, and that I made a $25 commission. It took like a month to make 30 cents more, but it didn't matter because at that point, like, it was that really like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. This is, there's something here. And for the first time I saw
reality
traction.
Shift.
Exactly. And then his second question to me is, why are you not running ads on that video? And now YouTube puts all types of restrictions over how many views you have to have before you can run ads and stuff. At the time, they didn't. And I was like, I don't know how to set up AdSense. I don't know what I'm doing. So it was like, it was very resistant of me to be like, oh, that's not the fun part. I don't want to do the marketing. I don't want to do that. And it was several months, and I did a follow-up video. The follow-up video did really well, where I just answered people's questions about it. And then I think somebody, oh no, this was later. But basically in this time, I was just kind of incubating and not really thinking about this as a bigger thing. It was just when I have time, I'll put out a video. So I'd review some styluses, because as people would ask questions, I might pop up a video, you know, if I saw a question 3 or 4 times. And it was a full year later. So it was 3 years ago around this time. The iPad Pro came out with the Apple Pencil, and I was like, I need to try that. And around the same time, the Surface Pro 4 came out with their stylus. And so it just kind of made sense. It was like, okay, I'm going to do some videos this fall. And so as this stuff came out, I did a video about the announcement of the device, of the Surface or the iPad Pro. And so then I started making videos as I had things to review. And that's when I saw everything. That's when it started to click for me.
Brad, just to rewind for a second. With that first video that got traction, so got 100,000 plus views, why was that, do you think? And I appreciate you left it alone. So presumably it wasn't how you marketed it, that video. Like, what was it? Was it shared a lot, or was it featured by YouTube?
It was purely YouTube recommendations. So this will get into the nitty gritty a little bit. So there are 2 ways that a video can really gain traction, and one is search engines. So anybody searching for Surface Pro review or Surface Pro 3 review, what are they going to find? Well, YouTube is going to, or Google will surface YouTube videos to the top of their search rankings. So if someone searches Google for something, like a review of something, there's a pretty good chance your review, if it's a niche product, is going to wind up on not only on YouTube's highly ranked on YouTube search suggestions, it's going to wind up highly ranked on Google search as well. So I don't know how much traffic was coming from Google search necessarily, but kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Most of this was coming strictly from YouTube recommendations. And I think what YouTube recommendations does is their algorithm says, oh, Brad's watching a lot of like iPad videos, so I want to keep Brad on the site. So I'm going to keep sending him iPad videos. And so that's why when you fall down a content hole on YouTube, YouTube will keep feeding you that content. For example, I have an older car that I can look out right outside my window here. And so since it's an older car, I have to fix it myself. So the other day I had to figure out how to change a light bulb. And so I watched like 3 YouTube videos on how to change a light bulb in a 2006 Jetta. And now YouTube suggestions are all like how to change the battery in a Jetta, how to do this in a Jetta, because YouTube's algorithm thinks that I really want to know all this stuff about my car. I don't. I just wanted to know how to change a light bulb, right? But but that's happens, how you.
I have to share this because that happens to me and drives me bananas. So like I'm a huge YouTube. I mean, I watch way too much YouTube. It's a problem. And every so often I'll watch something. Like the other day, I think I got pulled into like Conan O'Brien just released a couple videos. And they've been very popular. They're hilarious. But I don't normally like that. I like historical things, kind of like you were talking about, like with like the Vlogbrothers and stuff like that. And now I'm like, it won't stop giving me Conan videos. Like I just wanted to watch a few. Like it's almost like you want to set a setting and be like, just so you know, not interested in seeing it after this.
Yep.
But I wanted to add to that and ask you. It has so many videos, even though tutorials or reviews are for graphic designers is a pretty tight niche. There's still a lot out there. How do you think it's deciding that you should be the one, especially when you're starting? Now you have a huge following, but when you're first starting, how is it deciding, I think we should show them this one when you're new?
Yeah. So that's a hard question to answer. So let me back into that a little bit. How it's deciding is often based on the metrics it's looking at are one of the big ones is watch time. So that's something I've been focusing big time on my videos on the last couple months is how long are people watching into my video before they bail? And I've been trying to get that up. I've been trying to get that above 50%. And I do little animated humor bits in my video reviews. And part of the reason I do that is to entertain myself. And part of the reason I do that is because that like dramatically increases engagement. So like like if I don't put animated funny parts in a video, it'll be like around 35 to 40% of the way through the video when most people drop off. The numbers are kind of hard to explain, but when I add those animated bits, I'm hitting 50, and I had one a couple weeks ago that was hitting like 65. So yeah, 65% of the people were like making it 50% of the way through the video. And I've had a couple videos make it to like 50% of the people who click on it make it to the end. So like those are some of the things that YouTube's looking at. And so I know like a video that doesn't necessarily have a huge audience or a channel that doesn't have a huge audience will oftentimes take that metric and run with it. So if people are watching a video and really engaging with it, that will help you. The other big thing that's going to really help you is your thumbnail and your headline. If YouTube shows your thumbnail and your video to a lot of people in the recommendations, like say that watch time metric looks really good for you, and then it shows it to a bunch of people who have never seen your channel before, and nobody clicks on the thumbnail because the thumbnail's not engaging or they're not interested in it. If not enough people are clicking on it, YouTube's going to show that to less people as well. So that's another factor. And I think those are the two things is thumbnail has to be dead on. And then the video has to be better. And unfortunately, the video has to be better is like, that's like saying, I don't know, it's like that takes a lot of time. Like that takes years of producing videos to get to the point where you can make your video better. At least for me.
Brad, could we go even deeper? Because this is really, really gold and I love it. You mentioned watch time. What else can people do? So I love the idea of like the funny animated things, so it doesn't have to all be serious, and those kind of quirky bits obviously help prolong the watch time. What else has been really effective for you on that
feel
front?
Like you could really talk about any common tips for that, because like when you said that, I thought to myself, wow, I'm really going to have to up my game because I think my watch time is like 2 or 3 seconds.
There's always a huge drop. Like I'll lose 10% in the first 5 seconds. So that's kind of like when you look at your metrics, that's kind of normal. But I think so for me, scripting, like writing a crisp script. When I started, part of the reason I started doing what I was doing when I decided, hey, I'm gonna make videos. Like when I went from that point where I was like, oh yeah, I'm fiddling with videos on the side, to, you know what, I think this channel has traction and I think I could make some money on this, and I think I'm going to make this my side hustle. That's when it kind of clicked with me a little bit. And what was the question? Oh, about how do you get
watch
more
time? Like how
yeah.
to,
Could I back you up for 1 second though, Brad? You said
Sure.
crisp script. Can you explain what that means?
Okay, so yeah, that's exactly where I was going with this. So no, I've lost my train of thought, so you really helped me there. So a lot of videos, when I started doing reviews of design or illustration hardware, it was like my first video where I just said, hey, I got the Surface Pro, and I just talked into the camera and I pointed at the device and I just rambled. Like I had a general idea of what I wanted to talk about. But the problem there is then you have a 20-minute video where you're saying 5 minutes worth of content. And so that's the most important part for me, was getting to the point where I wrote my script. I will spend a half a day, sometimes a full day, writing a 3 or 4 page script. And I will write it and I'll set it aside for a few days, and then I'll go back and I will rewrite it and I'll tweak it. And I'm always up to the point where I record, which is usually on Sunday mornings. Like I'm fiddling with the script. And the tighter you can get the script in terms of taking out words that you don't need and things like that, the better the end video is going to get.
Yeah,
exactly.
Love it. So I think that's a great tip with the scripting, but a lot of people find it kind of awkward talking to camera.
Yeah.
And myself included, I never know
Me
what's
too.
a good balance between, you don't want to overscript it where you're almost reading off a teleprompter, but you don't want to have no script and be floating around.
Yeah.
How do you kind of manage that?
What I did was I'd write a script, and I still do this somewhat. I'll write a script, and then I'd read one line on my monitor, and then I'd memorize it, and then I'd look at the camera, say the line, and then I'd read the second line, and then I'd look in the camera and I'd say the second line, and then I'd take that whole video, which would be like 20 minutes long, and I'd condense it down to like an 8 or 10 minute video by cutting out all the space. That was good and bad. That was part of the learning experience, because that was another, I talked about like mean comments, that really there's gold hidden in the really angry comments. And one of them was like, stop jump cutting so much, or stop jumping around the screen so much. Like, but I was doing that so that I could memorize the script.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where you do it, I'm doing 1 or 2 videos a week for 3 years. And now I'm to the point where I write a script and I'm just better at memorizing it. Now I think, okay, I know what I want to say, and I've written this paragraph. I've rewritten this paragraph 3 times now, so I know how it should sound. And so I'll read it, and then I'll just say what I want to say into the camera. And if it didn't sound right when I said it out loud, I might go back to the script and try it again. So I'm usually doing multiple takes. The other thing I do that's become my habit, and part of the reason I do this on a Sunday morning is my family usually isn't around, is that when I write my script, and then Sunday morning I sit down around 10 a.m. and I look at my computer and I rehearse, and I'll go through, I will read the script out loud, like, because there is that like YouTube, I don't know, like I talk louder, I have more emphasis on my words. It's not how I usually talk. Like my YouTube thing is definitely far more,
I can testify to that. But I love it though. It works. It grabs me,
and sometimes it gets me, and that's why I'm here. I'm talking with my arms, which is how I do in a YouTube script, which is why I'm hitting my desk and banging on it. But that rehearsal that I go through really, really helps as well. And then once I've rehearsed the script, then I turn on the camera, I set up the lighting, I get everything the way I want it, and then I do the couple lines at a time, and I sew it all together.
Awesome. So you mentioned jump cuts. I believe they can actually help with the watch time, because they hold engagement when they're not completely overdone. That's better than just a single take of talking, right? Because it keeps it feeling fresh. Yeah.
I think part of what I was doing wrong at the beginning was that I was like saying a sentence and then cutting, and then saying another sentence and cutting. And I think jump cuts can be used as a way to break it, almost like to break up a paragraph. Like you complete a thought and then you jump, which is like a visual way of telling people, okay, I'm moving on to the next thought. Whereas how I was doing it early on, I was just jump cutting in mid thought because that's how it came out of my mouth.
Yeah. Do you know Amy Landino by any chance?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, she just had a really powerful video. I don't know if you saw her most recent video.
No, I haven't seen her latest one. I'll check it out though.
Yeah.
But she actually did a tutorial on how she cuts her videos. And so she'd do a jump cut and she will literally overlap the end of the last word and the start of the next one. So there's no dead air. And it will look like when you listen for it, it sounds weird because she's talking over herself. But when you watch the video, not looking for it, it just flows.
It seems like it works out well. I do that from time to time, especially in the animated bitlets. With the talking head, I don't do it too much. It just takes more time to edit a video that way. But where it comes in handy for me is when I do any kind of humorous bits is the tighter you can make that script, the better the joke works. Also, I should also point out, I write way more jokes than I put in my videos. Most of them, I'm not a comedian. Most of my jokes fall flat. So I'll write 10 jokes and 3 make it in the script. Part of it is the other thing I've become conscious of over time is just coming off as really sarcastic or mean. That's the other problem, is that if you're talking about a product and you make some kind of joke and then you watch it back in your head, it doesn't sound mean, but on video, it sounds like you're kind of snarking on the product. And if somebody is sending you a free product to review, the last thing you want to do is make fun of the way the buttons feel or something like that if they don't really feel bad, you know?
Good point.
So that's
try being British, by the way.
What's that?
Suffer with this. Try being British because we're inherently very deadpan and straight-faced and sarcastic. So all the time we come up with scripts for stuff and be like, we just can't say that. We've got majority like American audience, foreign audience, and we're going to sound like massive arseholes if we put that out.
Can I ask? So we had just recently for Black Friday, Cyber Monday made our first we invested money into an ad where we had it professionally edited and animated. When I was talking to the Sean who had made it for us, he had said that he had taken a course on it, at a conference, and they had said when you transition, you never want, for instance, if words are coming in, the word should already be moving in. Like you should already see part of the word coming in when you do the cut. You can't ever have a space where someone's expecting something.
Oh.
Or you want to minimize those. Do you find that general, because that sounds kind of like the philosophy you were talking about, where something has to be entering, exiting a frame, a word has to be beginning, something has to be happening so people aren't like...
Consciously, I haven't thought about that, but by copying other people, I probably picked some of that up, and that's actually a really good point. And I had, and sometimes it's just like, this is off. Like you just watch it and you're like, this isn't working. Like because part of it is nowadays when I make a video, I show my face here and there, but just a tiny bit. Maybe at the very beginning, like if I mention a sponsor or if I say, hey, this was provided to me by Wacom or whatever, like just to get my face in there and be part of my brand. But for the most part, I don't really show my face, only at the beginning and the end. Or if there's something where I'm really going to criticize a product, I'll show my face briefly. And so most of what I'm paying attention to is the audio and how it strings together. So I'm listening more than I'm seeing, because what I'm showing are either cuts of the product or I'm showing a speed draw of what I drew while I was using the product. And I haven't really thought about that as far as you want to show something or you don't. But sometimes I will take something and I'll be like I'll start talking about something and I'll be like, I want to show that longer. And so I'll actually start it before I start talking about it. Like I'll just a beat or two before I'll show it. And I've never really consciously thought about it as a technique. It's just like you're just watching it and you're like, it just that seems off. And you just kind of do it. And now that you say it out loud, it's like, oh man, yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
So Brad, talk to me about thumbnails, because obviously majority designers listening to this show, and hopefully they're starting to feel a bit inspired to put out some creative content. You mentioned how important the thumbnail is.
Yeah.
And obviously being designers, I'm sure they're ready to design up a storm, but what are some fundamentals they should put into that?
So as a designer, we have a huge benefit, like a huge step up on the rest of YouTube. So
do you not feel like a superhero? I love having that in my back pocket, because you look at how hideous they are and they don't have a clue, and you're like, I can just rustle something up.
I got this. Right. So absolutely. Good. And so like if you're a designer, you've already got like multiple steps past everybody else out there. So first of all, consistency is creating that brand so that like when people see your thumbnails, they're like, oh, that's so-and-so. I want to watch so-and-so's content. That is huge. I know there's like 4 or 5 channels that no matter what they do, I'm going to watch what they have. I subscribe to a lot of stuff, but most of that stuff is like, oh, when I have time at lunch sometime, if I'm perusing videos, I'll click on their stuff. But like there's a couple, and as soon as I see that style of thumbnail, I click. So having that brand, for me, it's yellow. I actually stole that yellow kind of from Amazon. I was at a conference last year, like a t-shirt design conference. Amazon's got this merch thing where you can print t-shirts on demand and sell them on Amazon. And so there's a whole community built around it. And then so I spoke to those folks about design. And we met some folks from Amazon while we were at the conference, because it was in Seattle and they had kind of these surprise guest speakers. I guess if you work at Amazon, you can't speak at conferences. So they kind of had to be like under the radar and kind of quiet about it. But it was heavily hinted at in the marketing of the conference that there might be a special guest sort of thing. And they had the coolest t-shirts on. They were like gray t-shirts, and they had like white and black artwork with like spots of yellow, like the Amazon yellow. And when I looked at that, I thought, wow, like Amazon's brand is usually like white with like yellow and spots of yellow. But the way they did it, like the yellow sitting on the gray with the whites and the grays, and like I was like, that is hot. Like it probably broke some of Amazon's like design rules, because this is just the t-shirt team doing their thing. And so it was right at a time when I was designing my own brand. So on the plane ride home, I'm sitting there like drawing out my stuff, and I started using yellow as a spot color on stuff. And I was like, this doesn't, like, nobody's going to look at this and think, oh, that's Amazon. It's a slightly different shade of yellow anyway. But it was like, I don't know, I saw it and I was inspired by it. And that's become my brand. So whenever people see that just big, huge swath of yellow, like, it's an instant, oh, that's Brad, because there's nobody else with huge yellow thumbnails or the yellow bar along the bottom of the thumbnail. Same thing with fonts and that sort of thing.
What are your thoughts on there? I've noticed there's 2 types of videos, and maybe it doesn't matter, but I noticed some people, they consistently, I do notice that I tend to like to watch the ones that have that consistency you're talking about. You know, like on the left or right hand side, the text name of the video for people to read the thumbnail. Other people, particularly vloggers, I noticed, like, or no, just certain people, they don't do that. Do you feel like it makes a big difference? Is the headline in the bottom where you type it in fine, or do you feel like it's really important to get that text into the actual video thumbnail?
I'm still trying to figure that out. My experience so far has been the thumbnails that work for me are image of the product and then the word review and then the name of the product. Those are the ones that consistently do well. And if I ever mess with that formula, the initial group of people wandering in doesn't seem to be quite as good. But I look at those thumbnails and I'm like, to me, they don't look that good. Like every so often I'll see someone does a thumbnail and I'll be like, that's you become a connoisseur of thumbnails.
Yeah. Can I give you a tip, Brad? Without being too crass. Can I give you a tip without being too crass?
Yeah, do it.
Girl in a bikini holding an iPad. I see. So I know it's so ridiculous and it's so sexist, but whenever I'm on YouTube, literally you'll see some suggested video and it will be something completely unrelated to the girl, and it's got like 60 million views.
Yeah. Here's the problem.
And you watch it, she's not even in the video. So the drop-off must be ridiculous.
And then need a red circle over...
Yeah. Well, here's the problem. If you're married like me or Ian, you don't want to start getting those suggestions like Brad's talking about. Next time your wife is looking over your shoulder, she's like, why are all these bikini videos popping up? What have you been looking at?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Turn that around and be like, I was thinking of buying you a gift, my dear. Got to think on your feet, Dustin.
That's not going to work. No, she's smart.
And then the downside of that is the watch time. So if you click on a video and people are like, "Oh, this is a bait and switch," because I don't see that technique. That technique used to work really, really well 3 or 4 years ago. And the algorithm's gotten smart about sniffing that stuff out. And so that doesn't work nearly as well anymore because it's paying attention to that watch time. And so what happens is when people hit that video, if you've tricked them into watching something and then they bail because they're like, "Oh, another one of these," that's gonna hurt you in the long run, and that's gonna hurt your channel. The other thing, and this is another factor to pay attention to when you're kind of creating videos, as far as kind of building that audience, is from what I understand, the number of people who come to your video right after it posts is a good indicator to YouTube's algorithm that this is something worthy of being promoted. So like if I post a video and people wait a day or two to watch it, it's not going to perform as well as if people kind of rush in to watch it right away. And so that's another thing to keep in mind. And so those channels that kind of do the bait and switch, they're thinking about how can I get views on this video? They're not thinking about how can I build an audience so that audience wants to see the next video, so that audience wants to engage, so that audience wants to be involved. And so it's a short term, hey, I can make some money on this, it won't work, but it's a long-term strategy. It's fortunately the algorithm has figured that little piece of that out. Yeah.
Now, what if you do this? Like, I know the thumbnail, you're right, it's a bait and switch, but what if it's actually in the video? So imagine I have a video I do in my garage and behind me is a Lamborghini and I'm like, here's my garage, just bought a new Lamborghini here. It's fine to drive up here in the Hollywood Hills, but you know what I like more than materialistic things is books. Like, do you feel like if that Lamborghini's in the background, does that work? Or?
I hear it does. Although that guy, so I saw a story about him and about it was like, this guy's video went viral on YouTube. I was like, that didn't go viral. He bought all those views. Those were all ad views. There's nothing viral about that.
Does this guy begin with the letter T by any chance?
Possibly. I forget his name actually. Oh, now I remember. Not saying it though.
The more you learn, the more you earn, my friend.
That's right.
I seriously freaking hate those videos.
I really wanted to do a parody of like, welcome to my backyard. It's like just a bit of grass out there.
Right, exactly. I could show my 2006 Jetta and go, YouTube money, people, YouTube money, right?
Yeah.
I think we know what the artwork is going to be for this episode.
Right.
Yeah, we do a custom piece of art for each episode, Brad. I know you're a busy guy, but I mean, if you had the inclination, sometimes the guests do it themselves. So totally up to you.
I was kind of hoping that I'd get a Lisa art piece for this. I don't know if that's asking for too much, but I like the Lisa thumbnails.
Okay.
Could we do Brad with some sunglasses on, looking cool, sat on a Lamborghini, reviewing an iPad?
Cool. I think I want to sit. I want me standing like on a Toyota Camry. I want it to be like the most benign car possible. Yeah. I don't want it to be.
That would be hilarious.
But I want to look like I don't realize that it's just a Camry. Like I want to feel like, oh, this guy thinks he's leaning against the Lamborghini, but it's not.
What do you think, Lisa? Weirdest brief that you've ever had?
She's literally writing it down. Good. She's going to kill it.
I love it. So, Brad, have you got any kind of more, now that we're into sleazy marketing land, of course, have you got any more magic bullets for all the aspiring YouTubers out there?
I think I've already said the big things. Like every video should be, well, one, get in it for the long haul. And it's been a 3-year journey. And I know Tom and I, we talked about this on our phone call 2 weeks ago when we first met, is that I really feel new to this. Like in the last couple months, my life has kind of changed dramatically. Last year at this time, YouTube was a side hustle and something I did in my spare time, and now it's my job. And I thought, 3 or 4 years from now, maybe it'll be my job. And now it's kind of to this point where it is. It's a lot has happened, and in that process, I'm really trying to figure this stuff out. We talked about thumbnails before, and I figured out what works for my reviews. I haven't figured out what works for my tutorials or animations or, you know, so a lot of these things are big question marks where it's like, I've got to experiment more with that. So I just kind of want to put that out there as an expert. I
love the learning though, and how humble you are with it, where you're like, so I'm reading the comments and this guy didn't like my face, so I don't put my face in my own videos anymore.
That is stuff too.
That's the other piece of it, is that the like when I started, I was like, what am I going to do a weekly video on? The comments are gold, because like you'll do a review or you'll do a tutorial and you'll get a bunch of questions that are kind of the same. And if that happens, video, like that's a gold idea. And
that's the same for any creative content. Absolutely. So even if you're not on YouTube, like Instagram, whatever, you look for the patterns and do content on the back of it.
And part of it, I think if you're just starting out, is set a schedule and do the thing. And for the first year, the traction you're going to get is might not feel like traction.
That leads me into a question very related to this. You're a big YouTube star now. You have a huge amount of followers, you know, and people that come to see your work. But let's say like when you were like starting, or you were just starting to get traction, or maybe even now you feel this way. You're doing reviews, and like all of us, like someone can come along and compete with you relatively easily. You know, that you get a good camera and they can kind of look at how you're doing it and say, oh, well, he's already put the years in to figure out how this works. Now I'm just going to be a Brad, a little different, but I'm going to be Brad. Mm-hmm. So that kind of thing like bugs the heck out of me when I see that kind of thing happen in my own life, and I know from talking to the other 3 comrades here that is something that they don't particularly love either. How do you deal with that? Is that something you get concerned about? Do you never think about it? How do you handle it when it happens?
My first thought is like, how dare you? And my second thought is, I need to become their friend.
That's so sweet.
And it's totally true. First of all, there's not many people doing this. And then the other piece of this is what I found is that if someone's going to spend, a lot of the stuff I review is really expensive. If someone's going to spend $500 on a drawing tablet, they're not going to just take my word for it. They're going to read Amazon reviews. They're going to watch other people's videos. They're going to do that stuff. And so I think being friendly with the other people in that space is just a really good idea. The other part of it, and I said this off camera before we started, when we first got on, and I kind of fanboyed over Ian's work a little bit, and maybe a lot. But like when we first started, I said, "Oh yeah, you send a lot of traffic to me, dude." And that's the other piece of YouTube, is recommendation videos is where it's at. Like search and recommendation. So like if we're both doing similar stuff, he's obviously doing a lot of lettering stuff and stuff like that, but we're both using Procreate a lot on the iPad. I keep forgetting that Procreate's a drawing program. I think most people here know this. I always forget when I'm out of designer world and I say, I love Procreate. People are like, you're a freak, because that means a different thing.
But it's a weird name, isn't it?
It is a weird name.
Yeah. I was doing keyword research the other day, and like all this weird stuff was coming up, and I realized better say iPad with Procreate.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, try being in a non-design circle and start talking about using your GIMP.
Right.
That's not great either.
Or even GitHub or something like that. People are like, it's a GitHub. But Ian sends traffic to me, and I might even send traffic to him, because once you kind of get into that, like if I'm watching YouTube videos and I'm watching Procreate videos, what's going to happen? YouTube's like, Brad just watched 2 Procreate videos. Let's give him another Procreate video. Let's suggest another one. Let's give him something in that. These people become your peers, and these people become their content helps your content. And in general, what I have found, and part of it is just me organically growing, but as this niche has grown over the last 3 years, the types of videos that I'm going to be getting recommended by have been growing, and as other YouTubers have been coming up at the same time, it's a mutually beneficial thing. People don't want to just watch one review and buy a thing. They want to watch multiple. People are gonna, if someone's curious to learn from a tutorial, they're probably watching a lot of tutorials.
So if you see someone new pop up that you've never heard of before, and all of a sudden their traffic growth, just that you go look at their view count, and their view count is surpassing yours, they've only been around for 6 months. Do I think I say this because I deal with this and I'm trying to manage this emotionally before it destroys me. Does that bother you, or do you just think a new friend? Because maybe that's what I need to do.
I try to think a new friend there, although sometimes I'm just inspired. It kind of, I think part of it is because I'm getting old and I'm kind of past the competition thing. I know if I go back 10 years when I started freelancing and I was doing like web design, when I saw a new freelancer enter the scene, I would get that feeling like, oh, they're good. I'm kind of competing against them. Yeah. But I guess everything that's good that's happened to me in my career has been from working with others. And you also see it, unfortunately, the first 2 or 3 years, sometimes more, of YouTube is a tough road. And it takes a lot to stomach that. Like, to just, even if your videos are gaining traction and you're putting out like this video only gets 500 views and the next video gets 500 views and the next video, like, on one way to look at that is, wow, 500 people watched that. That's a lot of people. The other way to look at it is, oh, that hasn't grown, But like you don't always see the growth, and it fluctuates. And some months are higher and lower than others.
Is there anything you could add to that? Because I don't know if you saw, Brad, I started my own YouTube recently.
I did, yeah.
And it's like a hobby project. I don't have that much time for it. I wish I could devote as much as you do, but I'm at that super early stage. There's no traction. I'm 6 videos in, so I'm like a month and a half in, and it's like similar to what you said. The first video was like 400 or 500 views. Now it's like 100 views,
right?
And obviously I want to keep doing it for the right reasons, but there is a part of you as a creative and as an entrepreneur, it's like, I need to be seeing constant traction and it needs to be growing. Otherwise, like, I feel like crying in the corner and giving up. So is there anything you can add to that? Because I feel like
boost morale.
Like, this is so applicable beyond just YouTube. It's for any creative out there who's trying to build something. How do you get past that? How do you think long term? I know what my own answers are, but I'd love to hear from you because I need to hear it myself.
So one thing that I wish I knew when I started that I tell people, well, actually, this is the first time I'm giving this advice because I don't talk to YouTubers in person very much. But the one thing that I didn't realize is that when a video really takes off, and this happened to me, my views basically doubled last month. November was huge because the iPad Pro and the Surface Pro both had reviews that month. And so my views just like blew up. But if you look at those 2 reviews, like I had 1 million views last month for the first time ever in a month period, right?
Oh, nice, man.
But those 2 reviews together only got 250,000 views between those 2 videos in the month of November, which is a good amount of views. But like, how did I go from 600,000 to 1 million views if those are only getting like 250,000? Where did this other 200,000 views or whatever come to? My math is horrible here, but just bear with me. Where did those extra views come from? Yeah. And the answer is that people watched the iPad or the Surface review and said, that was kind of fun. I'll watch another one. And so that became a gateway drug to your other content. So what you're doing now, Tom, is that you're building an inventory, and that and 2 things are happening. One is you're building content that when you do have a video that finds that traction, all of a sudden people are going to like, this is good. And you're going to have this backlog of stuff that people are going to go back to and watch. So you're building for the future. And the other piece of this is every time you do a video,
by the way.
That's so brilliant. I like every so often you're a piece of advice you'd never heard before. And I never thought of things that aren't say as successful as others, as being building inventory for when it finds.
That's genius.
It's so smart. I never heard that.
And I apologize for cutting you off, Brad. I just had to be like, thanks, man. That's
literally
awesome.
highlighting that.
Nice.
There's a really good case, actually, where Casey Neistat gave a shout out to Sarah Dietschy, who, because she did like a parody of his blogging style. And the reason why she then became so successful was because she had a backlog of really good work. And she'd done like creative interviews and stuff like that. So I think, you need like I was saying, you've got that inventory of stuff that if for some reason someone mentions your name somewhere or your video gets shown somewhere, that they don't come to your site and you've just got a few of you like playing the guitar or like just sitting on the camera, just like hello,
Hey, I was proud of those, man. How dare you?
But they know that they can see that. Oh, hang on, that actually they are quite. They're worth subscribing to, and worth
around.
seeing all that other content. So and then it's making sure that once that does happen. And there is a likeliness that happen, not like, super viral success, but, getting a big load of traffic coming along, because it's never just like constantly, a growing arc. There's like sometimes, an article might show you and then suddenly you get a bulk of a new subscriber base. But then there's the other end of that, and that's the momentum. So once you do get it, you think, okay, how can I build upon this? So the people who've just subscribed need to know, oh, there's going to be a video next week or the next day or whatever that may be, so you can then just tap into it and then sort of push forwards from there, if that makes sense.
Consistency. Brad, you were kind of saying before in terms of the inventory being the good thing, and then I think you were going to say second.
So the second thing is, I think doing something on a consistent basis is important because you're finding, for me, it was about finding my own voice and finding my comfort with the medium and improving what I was doing, just, a little bit at a time. And just kind of understanding how to talk in a way that's kind of engaging. And also just figuring out what people want to hear. Not that you're pandering or anything, but when that video does come, and it will come, you'll be like, oh, that's the part of entrepreneurship that people are really curious about. And the only way to find out where those gaps in people's knowledge is to just do it, is to create the thing. And I think that's what I discovered is I got kind of lucky, and I found a niche where there weren't a lot of people reviewing the hardware I was reviewing. Like individuals were, but there was no company, or there was no one entity who was doing it. Now there's a couple people out there. There was a guy back in the day, his name is Ray Friendon, very good artist. He would do like blog posts on the kind of stuff I'm doing, but there wasn't really anybody who was really owning it and running with it. And it took me a while to find it. And the only way I found it was just by creating and keeping that going. And that's something I've heard from artists from all walks of life.
That's so true.
I hear this thing about consistency constantly, and I think it almost seems like it's an essential part of being a successful artist or entrepreneur, or really anything, is this consistency. So like Tom had mentioned, your videos are so well put together. So I'm like imagining, let's say when you started doing this and it was a real struggle to start to use this software to edit it together. Everything takes 10 times as long, so you don't really know what you're doing yet, right? Did you say to yourself, every week I'm going to release something, even if it comes down to the day and this thing is still a little bit like embarrassing or not quite put together right, it's still going out because that's what I do? Is that what your thought process was, or how did you think about that?
Yep. Once I got to the point where I said I'm going to do a video a week, that was my thing. And I haven't missed a single week. Excuse me. I haven't missed a single week in 3 years now.
What? That is insane.
Yeah.
That is
impressive.
Wow, that's impressive.
I have gotten good at like producing stuff ahead of time. So like I'm going on vacation at the end of this month. So I already have like one video edited together that's going to come out while I'm gone, and people have no idea I'm on vacation, right? And then I'm going to make a second one to do kind of between Christmas and New Year's. It's kind of a year-end wrap-up type thing that's half written and hopefully will be done, early next week. So it's not like you think ahead on it, and you kind of, some of the videos are easier to produce than other ones. But yeah, I for me it was like, yep, this is going to happen. And it also became a loop. I think I would have gotten discouraged. Also, I didn't really mention this too much, but way back in like 2007, 2008, I started drawing like a web comic and posting it on my website. And it seems like ancient history now, but I did that for about 3 years. And I built a good sized audience. I had like well over 10,000 RSS subscribers to that comic. And it was about, it was kind of a goofy comic strip about web design and usability and stuff like that. And I learned a lot by doing that on a consistent basis. And a lot of those comics were not funny, especially early on. And a lot of that fed into what I'm doing now. But it's funny because I look back at that and I think, oh, those are antiquated and those are old school. But in retrospect, now that I think about it as I'm sitting here, like so many of the lessons I learned then about building that audience are things that I'm doing now that have just kind of become second nature.
Yeah.
Yep. Love it.
Well, that's the thing that we forget, that even though something we're doing that isn't necessarily giving us the results we want is actually building, the next brick or the next layer or the next level for, your next project or your next phase in your life. And you only realize that when you look back, but it's difficult to see it while you're doing it. Yeah.
Going back to the builder analogy, you could put 10 bricks.
Sorry, Brad, this is a recurring theme. Ian loves his builder. It references him as often as possible for any analogy.
You could put one brick down, it doesn't look like a house. You put 10 bricks down, it still doesn't look like a house. And it takes quite a lot of bricks before you think, actually, that's sort of looking like a house.
Yeah.
And then it looked like a bit of a shell of a house. And I think it's that thing where you're just like, you can't see the bigger picture until you've gone through and put all those things down. And like something I've been learning, it's just about, lighting and the sound and the video. And you can watch other YouTubers and what they say about the best cameras, but actually it's all about how it works for you. Because like I'm trying to sort here in my studio an overhead rig, and what someone else suggested actually doesn't work for me because of how I've got the desks and how it's arranged and stuff like that. And actually it's through, and sometimes you have to spend a bit of money to try it, and you go, actually that doesn't work, and then you realize you need to try something else, and you find that works for you. And I think knowing that it's not actually, there's no one size fits all in terms of the production, how you film yourself, what camera you use, what microphone you use. It's just trialing stuff out, borrowing it from friends, but you can actually hire stuff from photography stuff and, get that in. But don't let that worry you, that also comes through time as well. And like looking back at mine, looking back at Brad's, you'll see the lighting was, not that good, and the audio wasn't that good, and the video wasn't that good. But then it gets better, and it only goes through just you practicing it and going through the journey and trying stuff out and seeing if it works and seeing if it doesn't. And,
Yeah. So one of the things I aspire for my channel to be, it's not there yet, is right now I'm known as the review guy who occasionally does tutorials. But one thing I want to have my channel be is basically a journey to becoming a better illustrator or becoming a real illustrator. I hate that term, real illustrator. I shouldn't say that. But like I want it to be about the journey, because what you just said is so important. And most of my audience, I'd say like half of my audience is probably under 25, like according to YouTube's metrics. So I've got a lot of like a good chunk of like kids in high school watching my channel. I got a good chunk of kids who are not kids anymore, but yet like young adults who are just figuring this stuff out, just starting their career. And that's like half of my audience. And a lot of them are like, I don't know what to buy. I don't know what to do. Or they'll buy something. And I get one of the comments I get a lot is, oh, I bought the iPad last year. I'm thinking about getting the new iPad Pro this year. Is it worth the upgrade? And I'm like, no, you have something that's good. It's the same thing. It just charges the pencil differently, And so I hear that all the time. And I think it goes to what you were saying about building, is like when you were in that stage and you were just laying down one brick at a time, it's so hard to see what you're building. And it's only years later looking back at that you're like, oh, that's what I have. And that's what I aspire my channel to be, is that I want it to be the journey of becoming a better illustrator, not just for me, but a lot of the folks watching. And how, so that's one piece that I haven't figured out, that I think is a big piece, is how do I capture that journey? Because it's about me becoming a better illustrator, but I also want it to be about how can they learn along with me. I haven't figured that out yet, but that's cool. Somehow I've become the tech guy talking about hardware. Yet what my message really, what I want it to be is like it's not about the tech. It's about doing the work. It's about putting in all that practice.
Yeah.
Mm.
Cool. Well, I feel very confident that if you're happy to, we can have you back on the show, Brad.
Yes.
To get into that stuff.
When I hit a million.
yeah, exactly. We'll pop a bottle of champagne for you on the
right,
call.
exactly.
I would love to have you back for part 2, if possible, not just to talk about the journey of being an illustrator, but I'd love to devote some real time to talking about some of what we've talked about before this call in terms of isolation, working alone, burnout, all of those fun things, as well as some of the highs. But I feel like if we squeeze it in now, it will be exactly that. It will be squeezed in, and I feel like it deserves its own episode if you're happy to jump back on.
Definitely.
Oh,
awesome,
cool.
man.
I wanted to add to that builder thing that also, if you're like me, when you build your house out of these bricks, you end up having like this random pile of stones like that doesn't like quite connect to the door. And then there's like this area where people are like, why the heck did you put that onto your house? And you're like, I bought the wrong bricks. That's how my business feels, like it did build a house, but there's all this random stuff on it.
Yeah. We occasionally get like fan art and stuff like that from listeners of the show. And one of my favorites was, I think Ian mentioned the builder. And I said something similar in like an early episode where I was like, the thing is, if you keep adding brick by brick, eventually over time you end up with a pile of bricks. And someone literally illustrated a pile of bricks and turned that into a meme, and they like hand lettered that as a quote. And I wish I could remember who it was, but I was like, you sir are a hero.
That's awesome.
Oh man, that is so true.
For everyone listening, if you ever want a way for us to like repost your work and like give you a shout out,
yes, that's
like
brilliant idea.
pick out some ridiculous shit that one of us says and then illustrate
there's a whole lot of ridiculous. Yeah.
Cool. Brad, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing so much
great being here.
In-depth knowledge about YouTube. I know we kind of picked your brain on it, but it's super useful for all of us. I'm sure it will
definitely.
be for all the listeners out there who are kind of toying with the idea of starting a YouTube, or like me, if you've done it and you haven't yet found traction. But I really appreciate it, man. And yeah, we'd love to have you back on. But in the meantime, where can the dear listeners find you online with your many ventures?
Okay. So there's a new site out there called youtube.com. That's probably the best place to hook up with me. Twitter and Instagram, I'm building followings over there as well. But I think the good stuff's over at YouTube. Is just Google Brad Colbow and you'll find me. I think if you type in like YouTube/the Brad Colbow, that's the official YouTube channel. But that's where all the hard work goes. That's where all my love is being poured into these days.
Nice.
That's when you know you've made it, man, when someone can just Google your name. When you Google my name, it's like an old Scottish football commentator or something. Like
I Googled my name the other day and it was all like prison, like when you're getting booked into prison pics. I was like, I haven't made it yet. I thought I did, but it's turned out not.
I feel kind of bad because there's only one other Brad Colbow in this entire world. He's this young Canadian guy. I think he just graduated from high school. I feel so bad for him because like it's a fairly unique name, but he'll never own it. Like I own every variation of Brad Colbow on the internet. And so if you are watching this, Mr. Young Brad Colbow, I'm sorry.
but in the same token, don't even try it, buddy.
If you touch illustration.
I was gonna say at the same time, you've got this pair of coattails like with like some handles on them.
Yeah.
Milk that for all it's worth. But yeah, very much YouTube is the place of saying those other social networks. I mean, I know you're working on some cool stuff for your website, which hopefully I'm going to try and help where I can with. You got some incredible Udemy courses as well. It might be worth giving them a shout out. I guess if someone Googles Udemy, Brad Colbow.
Yep, definitely. I think what's important is my philosophy in terms of like selling some of that stuff is it kind of sells itself, which is why I really like the YouTube channels. If you can make engaging content, the rest of it follows, which is so nice because I hate sales pitches. And so knowing that it like just kind of sells itself, if you make good content, the people and the money will follow. Is a good
just come
place
into your
be.
ecosystem, right?
Yep.
And we're all about engagement on the show. You know, we love when you guys leave reviews and shout outs and that kind of thing. So if you do go and follow Brad, you know, leave him a comment, send him a direct message. Any creator loves that kind of thing, that recognition of the hard work they're putting in. So I wholeheartedly encourage you guys to do that, and just do that more in general. It makes the world a better place, I think.
Thanks, Brad.
Cool.
That's great.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Brad.
you, guys.
Yeah,
You're the man.
great.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. As always, you can find full show notes over at honestdesigners.com, or find us over on iTunes and now Spotify by searching for The Honest Designers Show. And remember, we're now on social media too, if you search for Honest Designers. If today's episode helped you, then it would mean the world to us if you took just a moment to leave us a quick review over on iTunes, as this is one of the best ways for other designers to discover the show. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next week right here on The Honest Designers Show.